In the space of only 11 years, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has become one of the most beloved and most successful film series of all time. With an offering of 22 movies, the MCU's Infinity Saga comes to an epic finale with Avengers Endgame, changing the entire fabric of the franchise. In this video, I'll be ranking all 22 movies from the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Infinity Saga, spanning 2008's Iron Man to 2019's Avengers Endgame. There's plenty to cover here, so let's get straight into it. Kicking us off at number 22, The Incredible Hulk. While the action scenes are fantastic and Ed Norton is a really great Bruce Banner, Incredible Hulk is fairly problematic, with a lackluster plot and scarce rewatch value. It plays pretty safe and lacks much of the connective tissue that would later solidify the MCU, finding itself caught between being a pseudo-sequel to 2003's Hulk and being a reboot set in a grander franchise. There's some nods and winks here and there, but it all feels like an afterthought. And with Norton leaving the role so soon, it shows just how uncertain the early groundwork of the MCU really was. 21. Thor: The Dark World. Another somewhat disconnected movie that feels like it takes a major divergence in the MCU narrative. The movie deals fairly well with the ramifications of Loki's attempted takeover of New York in the Avengers, with some great character moments between Loki and Thor, but also opens plenty of threads that just never go anywhere. With Natalie Portman jumping ship not long after, half of the movie just kind of feels redundant. Dark World tonally also feels too dark, as if it were instead an installment in the DCEU. Overall, this one just seems like a major misstep. 20. Thor. The best thing Thor has going for it, to me, is its direction and film design. Kenneth Branagh masterfully crafts a beautiful Shakespearean superhero flick with some great sequences, but narratively, it just feels a little melodramatic, drab, and uninteresting. Setting Thor up on a journey that would become quickly tiresome, not only for audiences, but for Chris Hemsworth and Marvel too, leading them to an early revamp with Thor Ragnarok. Regardless, I appreciate the effort that was put into pushing the boundaries of the genre and the way in which it adds substantially to the MCU mythology. 19. Captain Marvel. Released towards the end of Phase 3, Captain Marvel feels like it has the genetic makeup of a Phase 1 movie. Not only that it serves as a prequel, but in that it has a much smaller scale than some of the later movies. Again, it's another movie that plays it incredibly safe. It acts as a movie which ties together plot threads and small gaps left open in previous movies in an effort to open up new possibilities for future storytelling instead of immediate storytelling. It has great fan service and spectacular world building, but a largely unexciting narrative that doesn't leave me clamoring for another viewing anytime soon. 18. Iron Man 2. As the third film in the MCU and its first sequel, Iron Man 2 still feels pretty safe, pushing very few boundaries and resulting in a fairly average superhero sequel, which at times feels like just an overblown version of the first. It's easily the least intimate and heartfelt of the Iron Man movies and lacks much of their soul. And in fact, it lacks much of the drive of many of the other MCU entries, hardly doing much to forward the franchise. There's great action sequences here and good character development, but overall it's nothing more than pure brainless fun. 17. Black Panther. One of the most gorgeous movies in the entire MCU, with beautiful costume design and incredible set pieces that are also beautifully inspired by its culture. However, Black Panther faces some incredibly problematic narrative issues. A choppy first half, a rushed last act, an overblown runtime with too many narrative threads, and incredibly underdeveloped characters who I wish had been given more time to progress before they made their grand gestures. I love and admire Black Panther for what it is in the grand scheme of cinema and culture, but as an MCU chapter, I find it overrated and fairly middling. 16. Doctor Strange. An incredibly daring chapter of the MCU, showing just how far-reaching, complex, and multi-layered the saga could be. It changed the way we view the franchise and even redefined everything we ever thought possible about comic book storytelling and cinema. Benedict Cumberbatch is brilliant as Doctor Strange, and the movie is an amazing showcase of special effects which serve the story instead of overshadowing it. It's an incredibly exhilarating and stimulating thrill ride, but unfortunately one that I feel lacks some of the emotional depth of the other movies, and which doesn't really lend itself all that well to repeat viewings for me. 15. Ant-Man and the Wasp. I really like this film, but I've found that it just isn't as enjoyable after multiple rewatches. It simply doesn't hold up as well as the first. The movie certainly had a job to do at its time of release. It offered one of the most fun, entertaining, and bombastic MCU entries directly after the dire and depressing Infinity War. On release, it did its job perfectly, but with some time, it just stands as another brainless and entertaining entry in the MCU. Regardless, with Ant-Man and the Wasp favourite characters of mine from the comics, I still have a soft spot for this one. 14. Captain America, the First Avenger. This is another which never completely captivated me on first viewing. However, over time, First Avenger has really grown on me and continues to do so with every viewing, especially now having seen Cap's entire story arc play out across the MCU. This is an understated opening entry, but offers so many great building blocks, character moments, and exciting action set pieces that are vital to the overall franchise. Things I can only truly appreciate retrospectively now that I know and love the character. 13. Spiderman Homecoming. Before I was even a Marvel fan, I loved Spider-Man and had always hoped for a Spidey movie that was more accurate to source. Marvel Studios' take on the character and his world was everything I'd ever hoped for and more. More accurate and believable, exciting, charming, and incredibly funny. Marvel Studios finally gave us the Spidey that we deserve. Homecoming is a great first entry, sidestepping the usual origin story and taking us straight to the heart of Peter Parker's story. It's a fun and enjoyable ride with every viewing and never quite gets old. 12. Iron Man 3. Say what you will about this one, but I absolutely love it. It's one of the most thrilling, enthralling, and unabashedly bombastic chapters in the entire MCU, thanks to great direction by Shane Black. While it does have many issues, including a somewhat slow plot, Iron Man 3 is one of the deepest, most heartfelt installments of the entire franchise, one of the first which dared to tell a deeply human story. Its exploration of Tony Stark is perhaps the best character deconstruction the MCU has ever offered us. As for that surprise twist that got many a fanboy's panties in a twist, I gotta say, I loved it. Trevor remains one of my favourite MCU characters to this day. I never really liked the Mandarin in the comics anyway. 11. Ant-Man. Another enormous risk for Marvel, who took a character that, on paper, sounded like the lamest superhero ever invented, and in the simple act of never allowing it to take itself too seriously, created an incredibly special movie that stands from the bunch. Paul Rudd is one of my favourite casting choices in the entire MCU. He's not only hilarious, but brings a depth, humanity, and everyday guy feel to Scott Lang that just makes the character click so well and feel so relatable. For a movie that never should have worked, Ant-Man is straight up escapist fun and easily one of the best debut superhero flicks out there. 10. Avengers Age of Ultron. Again, this definitely isn't a perfect movie. It has plenty of narrative flaws, confusing moments, and plot holes, but it's a pure piece of cinematic escapism with plenty of awesome action sequences. It's a movie that almost simply exists as a piece of exposition to set up future movies and plays out like an overblown blockbuster spectacle, one of those switch your brain off kind of flicks. But I've always felt that after 5 years and 10 movies, Marvel deserved it. To this day, I love it every time I watch it. Ultron would have to be my most guilty pleasure of the franchise. 9. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Extravagant and colourful on the exterior with an enormous soul at its core, Guardians 2 is a deep and meaningful character study disguised as a comic book blockbuster. It's not just an action thrill ride, but an emotional one too, which continues to grab me by the heartstrings with every viewing. It's quite possibly the most down-to-earth and most human story in the MCU, despite being the one that takes us farther away from Earth, dealing with superpowered extraterrestrial beings. Sure, the movie has a few issues, but as someone who loves focus on narrative and character above all else, Guardians 2 is near perfect. 8. Thor Ragnarok. With Ragnarok, Marvel took their most troubled franchise and completely flipped it on its head, not only reinvigorating it and its lead character, but reinvigorating my love for the property along with it. While the past Thor installments were either too dramatic or too dark, Ragnarok turned out to be the polar opposite. It was bright, colourful, entertaining, and absolutely hilarious, with the mind of Taika Waititi, one of my favourite filmmakers, behind it. Ragnarok is an absolute blast from beginning to end, and a visual feast that I could sink into over and over again. 7. Guardians of the Galaxy. This can be pinpointed as Marvel's first enormous gamble. A movie about a C-grade team of superheroes which solidified audience trust with a brand that could continuously produce stellar entertainment regardless of how obscure the source. With Guardians, James Gunn took the MCU towards a whole new level of fun, inspiring the movies that followed it and reshaping the franchise, in effect, redefining the superhero genre perpetually. Exciting, entertaining, full of heart, and unashamedly ridiculous and self-aware, Guardians is just an enormous bundle of fun that never gets old or loses any of its unique spark. 6. Captain America: Civil War. For a movie which could have been an overstuffed superhero epic, Civil War does an incredible job at staying grounded, remaining a true Captain America movie with his character development at the forefront, while also giving Tony Stark, whose narrative had become tangled between Iron Man 3 and Ultron, his equal dues. The movie has surprisingly few large set pieces despite an enormous roster of heroes, managing to remain humble with a captivating story about honor, valor, and friendship. Civil War stands as a testament to great storytelling and how enormous ensemble pieces can work perfectly with the right creative team. 5. The Avengers. Avengers is a masterclass in storytelling and the first major stepping stone that allowed Marvel's grand saga to flourish. A blockbuster story that mashes up various completely different franchises, but does it in a way that no one thought possible, simply because of its focus on grounded human narrative. Avengers proved Marvel's winning formula: build characters, let the audience fall in love with them over time, and then, and only then, throw them together for a purpose. Despite how small scale it feels now compared to what we've been spoiled with 7 years on, I can't help but overlook the pure magnificence that was the Avengers when it was released, or how unique and completely inimitable it remains today. 4. Iron Man. In a time where comic book movies were either poorly produced box office bombs or dark and gloomy dramas, Iron Man dared to be different. A superhero movie which finds time to tell a great story without taking itself too seriously. It grounds itself on a human level, allowing us to suspend belief by telling a story that is, well, fairly believable in our age. It's the solid grounding the MCU needed to hook in an audience and allow for more outlandish stories to follow. And while it tested audience appetite for an enormous mega franchise, it never once took focus off its main goal of telling one fantastic self-contained story. It was the perfect way to start this journey, giving the series its heart and soul, and remains one of the best today. 3. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier is the tipping point of the MCU and possibly the bravest movie in the entire franchise. It stripped back pretty much everything we'd come to know about the MCU and dramatically changed the tonality of the series, proving that it could change tone and genre from picture to picture and still work. The exploration of Cap's past and his struggle to fit in with the modern world is one of the best character arcs of the series, and the movie provides many franchise best sequences. Winter Soldier is a riveting and explosive movie that continues to thrill me no matter how many times I view it. It's not just a perfect comic book movie, but a perfect movie, full stop. At number 2, Avengers Infinity War. Marking the 10th anniversary of the MCU, Infinity War was the incredible crossover we'd all been waiting for. A decade of stories and characters finally colliding in one epic adventure. In Infinity War, the filmmakers handled the balance of characters and narratives beautifully, effortlessly juggling screen time, furthering their individual arcs and allowing them to retain the artistic integrity of their individual franchises. Scenes with Guardians feel ripped directly from a Guardians movie, scenes in Wakanda feel like a direct sequel to Black Panther. And although Marvel proved that their winning formula had paid off, that devastating and unpredictable ending and ability to make the audience sympathize with the villain showed their movies could be far from formulaic. And coming in as my number 1 movie of the MCU's Infinity Saga, Avengers Endgame. Just when we thought Infinity War was the grand culmination of the MCU, along comes Endgame, a breezy 3-hour epic which quite literally puts a full stop to a decade of stories. The movie once again proves that patience and longevity are absolute key when it comes to world building and grand storytelling, in the way that it mashes up scores of characters and multiple franchises, melding them together in a way completely unprecedented in the history of cinema. Stories come to a head, some come to an end, and with a definitive closure on the ending, it gorgeously ties loose ends and pays off mysteries left open for years, feeling like the narrative culmination it promised to be. The movie is a pure love letter to fans who have devoted and invested so much time into this universe, perhaps offering more fan service than deep storytelling from time to time, but for those of us who've been there from the beginning, it's the most perfect and satisfying ending we could have ever asked for. It is quite simply the cinematic event of our lifetime, on a scale we've never seen before, and for pulling off such an incredible, monumental, and almost impossible and unbelievable feat, Endgame easily takes out my #1 spot. Nuff said. So, how about you guys out there? How does your personal ranking match up to mine? Fire away with yours down below in the comments, but remember to stay heroic and civil because everyone has a different opinion, and that's the beauty of it all. Until next time, guys, Excelsior! If this is your first time viewing one of my videos, you like what you've seen, you'd like to see more like this in the future, then please don't forget to hit that big old subscribe button up on your screen right now, and also hit that like button down below if you're feeling extra generous. Also, don't forget to check out my many social media accounts, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you have a wonderful day.